The wind at the marina wasn't particularly strong that afternoon, but it had that slick, salty texture that stuck to your skin. I walked up the dock in flats, not heels, and wore a blazer I'd bought 5 years ago, not because I couldn't afford better, but because it reminded me who I used to be when I started this journey. Professional, unassuming, invisible. The yacht loomed ahead, pristine white against the Miami sky. Valiant prestige, my boat, my money, my vision, but not, apparently, my name. The check-in desk was managed by two young staffers who looked barely out of college. One of them smiled politely and asked for my invitation. I gave her my ID. She looked down, then up, squinting. "I'm sorry, I don't see your name on the primary guest list." I nodded once, no reaction. "Check under Elwood or Valian. I'll wait." They asked me to step aside. "Just outside, if you don't mind, while we verify." It wasn't rude. It was practiced. Like they'd done it 100 times before to people they didn't think belonged. I stood there, watching through the glass as Braxton arrived, tailored suit, arm around his wife, grinning like a man who inherited the world by accident and thinks that's just how things work. My parents came next. Merrick shook hands with the concierge like they were old friends. Delora adjusted her scarf before walking in. Not one of them turned their head to see me. Not one of them asked why their daughter, their sister, was standing outside. I leaned against the railing, took out my phone, and whispered, "I paid for every bolt in this boat, and yet I'm invisible." Inside, the flurry continued. Staff rushed past. A junior coordinator, a young guy with a clipboard and that fresh out of grad school energy, finally came out and handed me a name tag. It read, "Service, Talon." He didn't blink. "You're here for support on boarding, right?" Before I could say a word, Delora passed behind him. She didn't stop, didn't look at me. She just said flatly, "She likes to help. Let her. It gives her a sense of purpose." I didn't answer. What could I say? That I owned the yacht? That I signed her last check? I knew how this went. If I corrected them now, it'd be my fault for making it awkward. That was the rule with my family. Don't make it uncomfortable. Swallow it instead. "Could you wait in the loading corridor until we need you for the dinner setup?" the coordinator asked, gesturing toward the side entry. Of course I could. Inside the corridor, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I sat on a plastic chair meant for people who take orders. Rage sat in my throat, but right behind it was something older. Resignation. You don't grow up in a house like mine and not learn how to be quiet in your own humiliation. As I scrolled through my phone, a voice startled me. "So, you're the other son?" I looked up to see an older gentleman, tanned, with the sort of expensive wrinkles that came from golf clubs and charity galas. He paused, then chuckled. "Sorry, daughter. They talk about the family all the time." I smiled thinly. "Happens." He walked off, clueless. That one stung. It shouldn't have, but it did. It wasn't the mistake. It was the confirmation. Even people outside the family knew who mattered. And who didn't. I stood slowly, brushing off my jacket. The hallway smelled like cleaning product and wet rope. I adjusted my blazer, and my fingers found the silver anchor pin on my lapel. It was small, understated, just like I used to be. My grandfather gave it to me once, when I was barely out of college. "When storms hit," he said, "you don't scream, you hold fast." I used to think that meant swallowing the storm. Now, I wasn't so sure. I didn't cry. I just walked, slow, steady, toward the stairwell that led below deck. Away from the crowd, away from the curated image of a family that had long stopped including me in their frame. The hallway curved to the left. I stopped in front of a door. Room 2C. Something about it felt off. No gold plate, no welcome card, just a plain number sticker. My hand hovered over the handle. This room wasn't even listed in the VIP guest deck. I turned the key and opened the door. The hallway was dim, quiet, and smelled faintly of bleach. 2 decks below the guest suites. This wasn't a room meant for someone staying as family. It looked like storage had been converted into living quarters last minute. Narrow bed, no welcome basket, no monogrammed robes like the others. What hit hardest wasn't the plainness, it was the label stuck to the door in plastic casing. T. Elwood, Operations. Operations. I took a breath and texted Keller. Did you assign this room? No, he wrote back. Came from the family's assistant. I can move you if... No need, I typed. Then stared at it, deleted the second line I wanted to add, and sent it anyway. If this was where they thought I belonged, I'd let them live with it. Let's see how they act when I stay quiet. The welcome dinner was scheduled for 7. By the time I arrived upstairs, the tables were mostly filled. I walked slowly, looking for my name. Not near the main table, not near the family section. Finally, I spotted it, on a smaller round table near the kitchen entrance. Talon Elwood. Smaller font, last row on the printout, like a footnote someone forgot to delete. I sat down without making a scene. The clatter of dishes behind me reminded me how close I was to the service station. 2 guests at my table turned to me politely. One asked, "Are you part of the media or crew? You're not seated with the hosts." I smiled. Something like that. No more questions, no more answers. I ate in silence, barely tasting the food. Then came the photo call. "Can we have the Elwood family join us on stage for a quick photo?" the photographer called out. I froze. Merrick stood, Delora followed. Braxton, Savine, and a swarm of cousins rose like a rehearsed choir, not a single glance back. No one reached for me. I stood behind one of the curtains, just out of the camera's view. I watched them pose. The photographer looked around, hesitated. Eyes landed on me. Delora saw it too. She gave a slight shake of her head, like she was brushing off a piece of lint. The shot was taken. Flash, applause. Group sits back down. When they erase you from their own image, you learn not to flinch. I left early. On the way back to my room, I passed a corridor where 2 staff members stood sharing coffee, talking in low tones. "I heard the Elwoods have another sibling," one said. "But she's not involved. Some scandal, maybe?" "No idea," the other replied. "Probably one of those trust fund kids who got cut off." I kept walking. They didn't notice me. Or maybe they did, and thought I was one of the crew. At this point, I didn't know which stung more. Back in the room, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat down at the small desk, dinner plate untouched from earlier. I unclipped the silver anchor pin from my lapel and placed it beside the plate. Then I reached for the name tag. T. Elwood, Operations. I flipped it face down and stared. The hallway back to my room was empty, quiet in that sterile, over-polished way hotel corridors tend to be late at night. I didn't rush. I didn't think I had anywhere urgent to be. There was nothing left on the schedule for me. I stepped inside the room without turning on the overhead light, just the lamp by the desk. The same one next to the untouched dinner plate I still hadn't thrown out. I took off my blazer slowly and opened the travel bag I kept locked inside the closet. From a side pocket, I pulled out a USB drive marked in black Sharpie. Family Archives, unedited. I plugged it in, sat back, and watched the folders load. It was something I'd compiled over years, every image, document, and clip I could find that showed I was there. Birthday parties, family trips, fundraisers. I knew what I was looking for, though I didn't want to find it. Scrolling through beach photos from a summer trip when I was 12, I spotted the original. There I was, off to the left, hand mid-wave, face half-turned. In the framed version that hung in my father's home office, that hand was gone, cropped clean. "They keep the version of the family they're proud of," I said out loud, just to hear it in the air. It sounded less bitter than it should have. Maybe that was the point. I zoomed in. My finger traced the border where the edit had cut me out. Precise, deliberate. You can't pretend that's accidental when it happens this many times. I leaned back, let the chair creak beneath me, and opened another folder. Gifts. A few months ago, I'd quietly arranged a graduation present for my niece, a full-package private yacht experience, overnight island stop, luxury dinner at sea, the kind of gift that makes a teenager think the world is made just for them. I routed it through a third-party concierge platform. No logos, no signatures. Tonight, over dinner, I learned Delora and Braxton had announced it as their own. The room had applauded. My niece had cried. Delora held her close and said, "Anything for you, sweetheart." No one looked my way. No one even thought to. "How do you speak up without sounding like you're counting favors?" I whispered, staring at the floor. I didn't cry, not because I didn't feel like it, just because I'd long since run out of tears for this kind of thing. So I opened a new folder and labeled it, Receipts. No, not to expose them. Not yet. Maybe never. But I needed to see it with my own eyes, that I wasn't overreacting, that I wasn't the crazy one. Invoices, confirmation emails, audio clips from event planning calls, system logs showing access points. Every item had a name, a date, a timestamp. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reality to stop being gaslighted. "I won't correct the record with words," I said to the quiet room. "I'll use proof." I clicked through each file, organizing by relevance. Documents showing how I paid for the yacht's renovation, screenshots of texts from Keller asking for decisions I'd made, budget spreadsheets with my name in the authorization column. For a long time, I didn't move. My eyes drifted to the ceiling as an old memory crept in, uninvited. 15 years old. I was sitting in the hallway outside my father's study, pretending to read. Inside, I heard him talking to one of his colleagues. "Braxton is the future of the Elwoods," he'd said proudly. "Talon? Well, she's figuring things out." That line became a headline they all adopted. Talon, the wanderer, the one who didn't settle, the one they hoped would eventually find her place. Apparently, that place was a staff room 2 decks below the family. But now I'd built something that employed more people than my father's entire political team. That generated more in quarterly revenue than Braxton ever managed in his string of forgettable real estate ventures. Still, I was mistaken for support crew. Still, they cropped me from pictures, clean, surgical edits, just like they'd done to my role in the family's story. It wasn't just visual, it was narrative. They didn't just remove me from images, they removed me from memory. I pulled up the photo again, the one with my hand barely in frame. I opened the editor, added a soft label at the bottom corner, and saved it under a new title. For when they say I was never there, the walls were thin enough that I could hear the bass thumping from the upper deck. Not loud, just enough to let you know that something was happening up there. Laughter drifted through the air vents in waves. Forks clinking, glasses tapping. Somewhere in the background, a DJ faded an old Fleetwood Mac track into a trendy remix. The Elwoods knew how to throw a party. They just didn't know how to include all their kids. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through social media. Hashtags like #grateful to be an Elwood, #family first, and #legacy night flooded my feed. Perfectly edited shots of Merrick and Delora smiling at the head table. Braxton giving a half-lifted glass. One even showed Savine hugging my niece with the caption, "So proud of our family." I wasn't tagged in a single one. They didn't hate me. That would have taken effort. No, what they had was worse. They had trained themselves to function like I wasn't there. The phone buzzed. I didn't jump. I expected it. A text from Merrick. "You're upsetting everyone. Please don't cause tension tonight. Maybe step away quietly." No, hi. No, hope you're okay. Just instructions. Cold, flat, like a notice to vacate. I held the phone in my hand for a minute, screen still glowing. My face reflected back at me in the black space behind the message. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I whispered, just loud enough to hear myself. "Even cowards know how to type." I turned it face down on the dresser. Not 3 minutes passed before the call came in. This time, from Delora. I didn't want to pick up, but I did. The silence on the other end wasn't technical. It was measured. She was choosing her words. "This night is important," she said softly. "Let your brother shine. Don't make it about you." I stayed silent. I'd learned that anything I said would be used against me. Silence was safer. "We all love you," she added, voice thin, too practiced. "But this is not the time to..." Revisit the past. Not the time, not the place, not the tone. Always something. I hung up without a word. There was nothing left to say. I stared at the door. Years of sitting at the kids' table, even after I turned 30. Of helping with fundraisers behind the scenes. Of never correcting them when they forgot who planned what, paid for what. I thought I was protecting something, preserving peace maybe. But tonight I realized I wasn't protecting anything. I was making myself easier to erase. I opened my laptop. There, in a folder marked pending, was every document I'd been collecting. Timeline, truth. I organized files into subfolders, each labeled with dates, events, names, not for revenge, for my own sanity. Then I sent one message to Keller. Temporarily revoke all Elwood Lounge access for Merrick, Delora, and Braxton. I'll approve it directly. He replied within a minute. Understood. Quiet implementation? Yes. I didn't make a statement. I didn't post anything. I didn't send out an email or confront anyone at the party. I let the system speak. Let the keycards fail. Let them experience being locked out of a space they assumed they'd always control. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The water outside looked calm, but I knew better. Currents run under the surface. They always do. Let's see who they are without me pretending I'm no one. Breakfast the next morning had the same polish as the evening before. Linen napkins, pressed uniforms, centerpieces nobody touched. The difference was the tension. You could feel it before even walking in. Merrick and Delora entered like they owned the water under the yacht, but the staff didn't greet them with the usual reverence. Instead, the hostess paused and asked, just above a whisper, "May I see a secondary form of ID for access today?" Merrick's jaw tightened. Delora smiled, brittle and practiced. "It's just a system glitch," she told her husband. "Let's not make a scene." No one looked at me. I was seated alone, just a few tables away, my name on the reservation, but still not acknowledged. Every so often, someone glanced my way, then looked quickly elsewhere, as if proximity might make them complicit. Even now, they'd rather believe the system had failed than admit I was the one who'd quietly pulled the lever. During a minor dispute over table layout, I offered, it was arranged that way to balance the flow of guests. Calm, factual. Merrick didn't even pause. We handle structure, Talon. You're just someone who lingers on the edges. No raised voice, no dramatic gestures, just that surgical tone of dismissal. The lounge went still. I set my coffee cup down, folded my napkin slowly, and left the table without saying another word. Not out of shame. I left the way someone leaves a meeting that should have been an email. In my room, the air felt heavier than it should have. I sat at the desk, reopened the messaging system on the hotel's internal app, and saw the notification. A message from Savine. "I'm sorry. You shouldn't be treated this way. If I speak up, Braxton will shut down. But I see you." I read it once. Then again. Then again. I couldn't decide if it was comforting or pathetic. Maybe both. "Thank you," I typed back. Just that. Not every wound needs a speech. Some just need to be acknowledged. I reopened the timeline, truth folder, and clicked through to an audio file labeled Deck 12, Braxton Pitch. I hit play. Braxton's voice filled the space. "We're proud to say I conceptualized and designed the downtown property myself. Every inch. Every inch. Of a building I had drawn from scratch, reviewed line by line with structural engineers, paid for out of my bonus at Valian. Silence used to mean strategy, a way to keep the family peace. But all it ever bought me was erasure. That peace wasn't real. It was an anesthetic. I created a new folder, Gala Presentation. I began drafting the schedule update. One new slide, one tribute video, one name on the closing title. Mine. Later that afternoon, I passed Savine in the hallway between the event suites. She didn't stop me, didn't say a word, just met my eyes, a conversation without sound. She didn't flinch, she didn't bow her head. Some people don't defend you publicly. But they also don't help bury you. Sometimes, that's enough. I returned to my room. Opened the video editor, uploaded the final cut, renamed the file. Uncropped. I stayed in my suite longer than I needed to. I could have walked the deck. I could have sat by the pool, watched guests sip their drinks, and pretend nothing unusual had happened the night before. But I didn't. Instead, I sat by the small console screen mounted on the wall, quietly logged into the internal system. A few taps and I could see access logs in real time. Lounge denied. Spa restricted. Security request for override. Denied. Merrick's name. Delora's. Braxton's. Keller messaged me a minute later. They're livid. Want to speak with someone. I leaned back in the chair, crossed my arms. No, I typed back. Let them feel what it's like to be locked out of something they assumed belonged to them. That was the difference now. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the walls. And as I watched my father's name blink off the digital VIP registry, I felt no triumph, just clarity. The knock came before noon. A young event coordinator, face tight, hands fidgeting, stood at the door holding a tablet. Hi, we just need to confirm. Is it okay to remove your name from the gala sponsor board and slide deck? She didn't meet my eyes. Someone from the family asked. I wanted to check. I looked at the tablet. A list of edits. Talon Elwood, struck through in red. I didn't answer. Not right away. I turned, walked to my bag, unzipped the side pouch, and pulled out a folder. Paper copies, receipts, transfer confirmations, letters of intent, all signed by me. I handed her one document, the gala's primary funding agreement, my signature at the bottom, stamped, notarized. Reverse the edit, I said. I'm the sole financier. And if they change it without my written consent, it's fraud. She nodded, flustered, and left without a word. You can lie to people, I murmured, but not to paper trails. Hours passed. I didn't speak to anyone. Just stared at the dock from the window, watching other yachts come and go. Noise echoed faintly in the distance, but inside that room, it was still. Later that day, I stepped out for air, and there he was. Braxton, leaning against the hallway banister like he'd been waiting, or pretending he hadn't. You embarrassed the family, he said, voice low. All this quiet rebellion. What are you trying to prove? I stayed quiet. You've always been like this, he continued. Emotional, needy, always looking for some kind of recognition. That part used to sting, but not now. I looked him square in the eyes. Recognition? That's what you've needed from him your entire life. Me? I only ever wanted the truth. I didn't wait for a reply. I walked past him. Let silence do the rest. Later, I met with Keller for the first time since this mess started. In person. Face to face. We didn't talk much. Didn't need to. We reviewed the gala prep. Restore my name across all internal documentation, I said. No announcement, just corrections. He nodded. I approved the press kit refresh. My title would now read Founder and Principal Partner. There would be no press release, no speech. I wasn't demanding visibility. I was reclaiming accuracy. After he left, I pulled up another file, longer this time, a full record of ownership agreements, trademark registrations, property deeds, every thread that tied this company to me. I renamed the folder, Proof of Presence. Each file had a timestamp, each document signed, all clean, all legal. I sat still for a while. Then, I clicked Upload, encrypted it with the passcode I hadn't used in years, my childhood nickname. By late afternoon, the ballroom was buzzing with quiet urgency. Staff moved like chess pieces, polishing glassware, aligning chairs, adjusting the floral arrangements that all looked identical to me. I walked in during the final seating check, just to see where they'd placed me. I scanned the table layout. My name was missing from the head section. The list rolled on. Merrick, Delora, Braxton, Savine, even the younger cousins who still called me Miss Talon instead of Aunt. But me? A junior planner walked over. She looked nervous. Hi, Miss Elwood. I'm so sorry, your seat's been placed here. She pointed toward a table by the swinging kitchen doors. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask why. Your family requested to keep the main table more intimate. I nodded once, nothing more. No smile, no correction. Even the chairs know I don't belong. As I stepped back into the hallway, a voice stopped me. Excuse me? Are you Talon Elwood? He couldn't have been more than 22. Young, dressed in event staff black, nervous, but trying not to show it. Yes, I said cautiously. I know who you are. I read about you last semester. Valiant Blue, right? You turned that around in 2 years? He held up his phone, not for a picture, just for proof he wasn't bluffing. I'm studying hospitality management. You're kind of it. He asked for a photo, not for social media. He made sure to clarify, just to remind myself it's possible. I said yes. No smile, just calm pride. For the first time in days, someone saw me. Not for my last name, but for my work. And he wasn't blood. Back in my room, I changed. Simple black dress. Clean cut. No designer logos. Just me. Centered. I slid the Elwood crest bracelet into a drawer, closed it without hesitation. I grabbed the USB drive from my suitcase. The final one. Everything I had, documents, contracts, timestamps, verified signatures, loaded and secured. I labeled it visible. Finally. If they won't name me, I will. At dusk, backstage, I double-checked the placement cards one last time. There it was. My name. Still at the side table. I left it. Braxton found me a few minutes later. I was standing by the AV booth, checking the final version of the gala video. You really think this is your moment? He asked, voice low, clipped. He didn't wait for my reply. Why are you always chasing things that don't belong to you? I looked at him, long enough for him to know I heard it all. You're mistaking presence for permission, I said. I'm not here to ask. I'm here to be seen. He didn't respond, just walked away, rattled. That was new. I reviewed the final cut of the video. There, just before the credits. My name. Executive Producer. Talon Rennick Elwood. The same young staffer passed by again. He didn't say much this time, just gave a thumbs up and said quietly, I've never seen someone win so quietly. I didn't reply. I reached for my anchor pin. This time, I didn't tuck it under my lapel. I centered it. The ballroom doors opened. I didn't walk in to take a seat. I walked in to take my place. The lights in the ballroom dimmed slowly, just enough to make every crystal glass catch the last of the golden hour. Waitstaff moved with precision, trays balancing champagne and cold oysters, the kind of quiet choreography that let you know nothing was left to chance. Except me. I stood in the AV booth, back corner of the room, next to Keller. He adjusted a few sliders on the soundboard and nodded toward the stage. Braxton walked up with the same smug gait he always had. Hair perfect, smile rehearsed, toast already half memorized. Tonight's not just a celebration of the Elwood family, he began, glass lifted high. It's a testament to how far we've come, to what we've built, together. Together. He rolled into a monologue about legacy, name-dropped our parents' decades in service, then pivoted, clean and calculated. This yacht, it's symbolic of our commitment to luxury, to family, to vision. I didn't blink. I'd heard it all before. The words never changed, only who they were stolen from. You can only steal what someone hasn't dared to name. Just as applause rose around his final line, a voice broke through the hum of conversation. Not Braxton, not Keller. A staffer at the guest registration table, microphone still clipped to his collar, said clearly and without hesitation, Please note, the founder of the Valiant chain, Ms. Talon Elwood, will be making a brief address shortly. It wasn't planned, wasn't cleared, wasn't part of any sequence I'd built. The air shifted. Delora froze mid-sip. Merrick turned, stiff as wood. Braxton, he paled. A few heads turned toward the AV booth. I didn't move. Keller whispered, You want me to clean it up? No. That one word, quiet, was all I gave. Braxton stormed toward us a minute later, fists clenched, a folded piece of paper in his hand. "This was a mistake," he hissed. "Take it back." He held up the paper. A fake memo. Internal, unsigned, designed to look real. "According to this, she's just design operations," he said to Keller. "No ownership, no title." Keller didn't react. I took the paper from Braxton, looked at it for a second, then handed it back. "We both know what happens when I let the evidence speak," I said. "Let's show them." I turned to Keller. He didn't hesitate. The screen above the stage flickered on. The first clip was footage from a job site. Me, hard hat and clipboard, talking to engineers. Then a signing ceremony. My name on the documents. CEO, founder, architect of record. Then interviews, partner firms calling me visionary, clients praising Valian Blue as Talon Elwood's legacy. No narration, just images, words, receipts. The final screen was simple, black background, white font. Talon Rennick Elwood, founder, Valian Blue. Some guests clapped, a few murmured, one stood and nodded in my direction. I didn't smile, didn't speak. I stepped forward from the booth, anchor pin gleaming under the overhead lights. Delora reached for Merrick's arm as he tried to rise. She whispered something. He sat down. Savine watched from her seat. No reaction, no surprise, just quiet recognition. The staffer who'd made the original mistake, he bowed his head slightly as I passed. I nodded once. They didn't know what I built. They only knew how I stayed quiet. That's over now. I walked past Braxton, shoulders square, steps steady. He didn't look at me. I didn't need him to. "Tell them what you built," I said as I passed. "If you still can." I woke up before the sun finished rising. The room felt colder, but not because of the air. Something had settled overnight. Not peace, not pride, just a clean stillness. I slipped on flats, pulled a light sweater over my dress, and stepped out onto the deck. It was early. Quiet. A few of the staff were already prepping for breakfast, folding napkins, wiping down glass. Re-straightening what had already been perfectly aligned the night before. They nodded when they saw me, not out of duty, out of something else. I nodded back. I stood there for a while, hands in pockets, watching the harbor. The same boat I had poured everything into now floated like any other, but it wasn't. And I wasn't. When you stop trying to be included, you realize you were never missing anything real. Merrick and Delora asked to meet. They didn't come with apologies, just polished smiles and a prepared tone. "This got messy," Merrick said. Delora picked up from there. "Let's move past the drama. Families need alignment. Appearances matter." They had it ready, a proposed solution. List me as strategic partner moving forward, reshare the gala video with a cleaner caption, update the press releases with a message of unity. It was damage control, wrapped in family branding. I let them finish. Then I looked at them both and said, "Appearances are what made me invisible in the first place." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm out. I stood, shook their hands, and left. Not with anger, with finality. Braxton didn't show. Not to the breakfast. Not to the follow-up meetings. Not to anything. But Savine left me a note, slid under my door. "You didn't need their permission. You never did." I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it neatly and tucked it into my wallet, behind my license. I remembered something Grandpa used to say when I was young and always building things out of scraps in the garage. "You don't need applause when you're building ships, you just need to make sure they float." Turns out, I wasn't building a ship. I was becoming one. My bag was packed by 9. The yacht staff had my car ready. Just before stepping off, a young woman approached me, early 20s, nervous. She said she'd watched the gala. She was applying for our company's leadership program because of it. It was the first time I saw someone like me run the whole thing. I reached into my pocket and took out the silver anchor pin, the same one my grandfather gave me. "Keep it," I said. "There's a time to hold your ground, and there's a time to sail." She nodded, gripped it like it meant more than I could explain. Maybe it did. I didn't post anything. No social media caption, no goodbye video. I walked off that yacht and didn't look back. The press was waiting at the dock. I waved, smiled politely, and walked past. No questions. Keller was already waiting at a cafe across the marina. 2 black coffees on the table. We talked about next steps, not about revenge, not lawsuits, not reputation, a scholarship for first-generation students going into hospitality. It's not about legacy anymore, I said. It's about impact. He nodded once, said nothing else. Later that afternoon, I boarded a different yacht. Smaller, cleaner, mine. It wasn't headed to a press conference. It wasn't a statement. It was just away. I didn't bring the anchor pin. I didn't need it.